Welcome to Be Brilliant with Jing Lang, the podcast dedicated to those seeking to excel in every aspect of their lives. Through conversations with her guests, Jing will tease out personal stories, helpful tips, and proven strategies to help you elevate your life and reach your highest potential. Get ready to dive in and discover what it means to be truly brilliant. And now, here's your host, Jing Lang.
Today's guest is Frederick Matt. Frederick is the Director of ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance at Dance Group. Fred has over 15 years of experience in the North American insurance industry, including 3 years in the consulting space developing ESG and climate advisory offerings. Fred is a French actuary, a fellow of both Casualty Actuarial Society and Canadian Institute of Actuaries. Fred also holds a financial risk manager designation. Today, he joins us from his home in Quebec City.
Welcome, friend. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Really pleased to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So, for a layperson like myself, can you tell us what's the difference between ESG, nature-related risk, and climate risk?
Yes, of course. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So I guess we can find many similar but slightly different definitions of ESG on the internet. But in my words, ESG is a set of factors or issues that are used to assess a company's performance beyond its financials. So what we're traditionally looking at for assessing performance it has traditionally been associated with investment practices. So we've long heard about responsible investment or ESG investment, but it's more and more getting into other areas of the business. From an insurance perspective, we're seeing companies doing responsible underwriting. From a broader perspective, it also influences how we are doing business with third parties. So from a procurement perspective, for example. So having said that, perhaps I could give a few examples of for the three axes so that we're adding a bit of clarity on each of those. Where we're talking about environmental issues, climate change is probably the first example that comes to mind, but it's quite broader than that. So pollution would be included in that, water scarcity or water management, loss of biodiversity, and so on. When it comes to social, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the aspects of the social spectrum that is gaining more and more importance in how we manage businesses. We can also think about workplace safety and anti-slavery practices, for example. And from a governance perspective or corporate governance perspective, good examples are sustainability policies that are in place in the companies, responsible investment practices, and how the membership or the board of directors is diversified or well-trained. So these are all examples that we see when we get into the ESG space. Now, having said that, it's quite broad. There's a lot of diversified topics, so lots to cover, but it's super interesting. Now, when we get to climate-related risks, as I've quickly alluded to, it's just a subset of the E, right, of the environmental aspects. But it got a lot of attention over the last decade or so for many obvious reasons, I would say. So when we look at climate-related risks, there are two categories, namely physical and transition risks. Physical is referring to, I would say, the direct impacts of climate change. So impacts on properties, on infrastructures that are stemming from two kinds again, physical risks. The first one is acute and the other one is chronic. So the former is related to extreme weather events, wildfire, for example, or hurricanes, whereas the latter is referring to slowly changing patterns like sea level rise, for example. when it comes to transition risks, it is actually stemming from the transition to a low carbon economy or society. So it can materialize as through changes in technology, changes in regulatory or public policies, uh, customer preferences. And there's the last one that usually included in transition, but we also see it as a standalone climate-related risk, is legal or litigation, which is a risk for a company to get sued for not taking into consideration climate-related risk or for greenwashing, for example.
So I
Um,
can jump in there. As an
of
actuary,
course.
do you quantify all that? Or how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are still at the beginning of quantification of climate-related risks. And this is currently mostly done through climate scenario analysis because it's hard to account for all of these interrelationships within the climate space to give a one single figure, right? Or $1 amount. So we're looking at different scenarios, and the other differences with the different scenarios that, especially on the physical risk side, and perhaps it's more of interest for P&C insurance companies. We used to do modeling on a 1 to 3 years, maybe 5 years basis or time horizon, given the short-term policies that they have in their books. But now we're talking about 10, 20, 30-year horizon. So it's much different. So yeah, we're still at the infancy of climate-related risks quantification.
Did you get impacted personally a couple weeks ago when there was a huge rain storm or just Toronto surrounding area, Ontario?
No, we did get a little bit of rain, but not as much as the Toronto area, that's for sure. But these are good examples of when I talked about acute physical risk, like extreme weather events. I think that was a great example of it.
Yeah, it's funny because, well, it's funny because talking about it now. It wasn't funny when my place was flooded a few months ago. And yesterday I was talking to the insurance company to check when I can get repaired. And they said because of the rain a couple weeks ago, now there are thousands and thousands of new claims that are more urgent, which given the main situation, it definitely was. So it's gonna be 2 months before I can get my home repaired. So the claim adjuster was saying, patience, please. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And that's a good point that you raised, because when we talk about physical risk, we usually think about the impact on just like the property or the infrastructure, like I was saying. So, from a P&C insurance perspective, but from a life and health perspective, I think what you described is just something that the company should be aware of, is there are going to be impacts of people on health. I've seen in an article, I think it was a couple of years ago, when there have been floods. It was in Australia in the Brisbane area, if I remember correctly, and they did a study afterwards on the impact on people in terms of health, mental. More specifically, no, it's something that should be considered, and then could have an impact on group benefits provider, for example.
yeah, definitely advocate for. Well, so you're a climate risk. Would you identify as a climate risk actuary or just ESG actuary? Or what's the right terminology
Well,
nowadays?
I don't think there's a right terminology. I definitely started more specifically in the climate space. This is where I still spend most of my time. But we also tackle from an enterprise risk management perspective. We also tackle other aspects of ESG, so the S and the G, obviously. Yeah, I would say for now I'm probably more a climate actuary than anything else. Yeah. But I still do not consider myself as an expert, at least not a climate expert. I will never be a climate scientist. So I'm just trying to sort of translate all of these climate, science in some way, but also terminology into the financial services language.
Well, you recently wrote a really good article to the Actuary magazine, which I'm hoping that it will go live by the time this podcast airs.
Hopefully, yeah.
If you were to distill that article into like one message for the audience, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think we it's a short article and we're trying to cover a lot, but in one sentence or in a nutshell, I would say nature related risks, and maybe we can spend some time defining it, but as they are defined, they are closely interacting with climate related risks. And like we said, climate risk has got lots of attention from many angles in the last decade, whether it's from a regulatory perspective, from a disclosure perspective, investors and other external stakeholders, and so on. And, obviously they're adding an additional layer of complexity, but we're not going to get away from it. And I believe that financial services / insurance companies should start looking at it sooner than later. So the goal is really to raise awareness, saying it's there, and try to explain what it is and how it's interacting with climate related risks.
How many actuaries are you aware of, right, that are in this space?
Oh, great question. I think if you'd asked me that question, say, 2 years ago, I would have said perhaps a handful of actuaries. I mean, in North America, because it kind of changes when you're looking at different. Knowing that in Europe and especially in UK, they have regulations that are far ahead of ours in terms of climate-related risk management. So I believe there are much more actuaries being involved in this type of work. In North America, I think it's a little bit different. We're kind of lagging a little bit on those regulations, and I don't know if it's. I'd say it's unfortunate, but sometimes the insurance industry is kind of waiting for regulators to provide guidelines and things. There are market leaders, but I think most of the pack is waiting for regulation. So in that regards, I think we're lacking a little bit. But having said that, we gained momentum in the last 12, 24 months. I think now IFRS 17 is kind of behind us. So there's much more focus on climate-related risk management. It would be hard to give, back to your question, it'd be hard to give you a number of actuaries. What I see is more and more people getting involved or having, say, part-time responsibilities, whether those folks are working in the risk management space or the reserving space, even on the pricing side of the business, just to make sure that climate-related matters are considered as part of their work. So this is what I'm seeing more and more, but it'd be hard to give you a number. Actually, I'm Canadian Institute of Actuaries Committee, which is called the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee. So we're kind of networking and connecting with many different people to try to make the practice evolve in that sense. So it's I think we got good momentum, and the evolution is good. This is just going in the right direction.
Is that the mandate of that committee you just mentioned, to formalize and be more mature?
It is now. I would say this is where we spend most of our time, to make sure or to provide the community with tools or guidelines as to how to integrate or consider climate-related risks into their say day-to-day work. But it evolved over time. I would say when I joined the committee back in 2020, the vast majority of, or the big chunk of the mandate was really still on raising awareness among the community. But it's, like I said, it's going in the right direction. I think we're getting more and more practical, and we're able to provide real life examples through presentation in actuarial events, webcasts, podcasts like we're doing
Yes.
today, articles, and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. And actually, our mandate is being reviewed right now because of that evolution, and we're kind of assess where the practice is at now and how we can best serve the public interest and the actuarial community.
So would you consider the climate risk is too much of a niche for a student, let's say, to get into it? And for those who is interested in this space, what is the best way for them to get involved?
Well, I guess I will answer the two questions with the same, response. And I'd say if you do have an interest, whether you are already in the workplace or whether you're a student, well, obviously it'll differ a little bit if you're a student, but it's just about, raise your hand. Make sure that your interest is getting known by your manager, the company, because there's some work to do right now, with this regulation that has come out last. It was in 2023. And there will be much more work to do in the future because the regulator is expecting continuous improvement and evolution in all of the Canadian insurers, and I say insurers, but that definitely includes banks. So there will be much more work to do, so much more opportunities for actuaries. So again, if anyone has an interest, my advice would be raise your hand. Just let people around you know that you're interested in working in that space, and I'm pretty sure that will happen. This is how I started my path or my journey within the climate space, and it eventually became a full-time job. So yeah.
So, remind us, you were in consulting for how long? 15 years before you came back to the insurance space?
No, 15 years in the industry. P&C, essentially Canadian P&C insurance industry, and then 3 years in consulting. And really it started in my last year of when I was in the industry. This is when I joined the CIA committee. Then my awareness and knowledge really kind of ramped up fairly quickly. And then when I joined, I'd say the main goal of joining, or say jumping the fence and get in the consulting, was to really make that ramping up become concrete, and like I said, kind of create my own job somehow. Yeah, in the climate space.
That's that. So what were the clients that you had on the consulting side?
Well, given my background, I think Canadian P&C insurance companies were a natural fit. So this is where I kind of started. This is where kind of sparked discussion, let's say. But then fairly quickly, I went beyond the Canadian borders. So I've had discussion and participated in projects with US-based clients, Bermuda-based clients, and then the next step was to get into some conversations and work with life codes that do have different issues, let's say, meaning that they're more looking at the asset side of the balance sheet, given the transition risks that they're facing. And then I've kind of expanded it a little bit and worked with clients in Europe, in other regions of the world. So yeah, that was a pretty exciting part of that journey.
Wow. So what I know we didn't specifically talk about this, but it's, I presume, very exciting time, very time demanding. Is that one of the reasons that can pull you back to the insurance? It can put a bit better work-life balance?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, it is one of the main reasons why I made that move. From a personal perspective, my wife has started her own business, so she was very, very busy. She is still very, very busy. So I think being back in the industry is providing better work-life balance. But we're still working hard. Yeah, we want to make sure that things are evolving as quickly as possible, as you know. But yeah, it's I think we're in good shape now. Yeah.
So you live and work in Quebec, right?
Yep.
And your French is the first language. And how do you use that as an advantage or disadvantage?
I think it can be both. So it's certainly an advantage for people who are fluent in both languages. I think this is an advantage, just like, I don't know, people working in Ontario and speaking Spanish, for example. I think it's speaking different languages. I've always seen that as an advantage, and as just additional skills in your toolbox. But it can also be disadvantages or challenge, let's say, that language barrier, because obviously Quebec is surrounded by, English. So whenever you get out of the province, people are speaking English. So I think it can perhaps be a roadblock in terms of a career perspective, depending on the companies you're working in. And I've lived both of those aspects throughout my career. I've spent a few years in a company that the work environment was 100% French, and I kind of lost my English. I got rusty. It was terrible. And when I jumped into the consulting space, then I really needed my English back. So I had this huge ramp up to make in the first couple months. That was hard, but I'm so grateful I did it, because now it's not a roadblock anymore, and it helps me when I have to work. So Desjardins is also quite, I would say, French focused, but when I have to work with consultants from Ontario at the moment, and it definitely helps. I can be part of those, podcasts like this one as well, without being too afraid,
We can also do this in Mandarin.
that will not be possible. No, but yeah, I think it can be both an advantage and a challenge. But at the end of the day, I think it's there's a little bit of willingness in it. I think at some point I said, no, okay, I want to be fluent in English as well. It needed efforts, but it's definitely worth it.
That's awesome. So you had an English immersion program while you're in consulting space.
Sort of, yeah. And I'm trying to learn Spanish at the moment. So
that's amazing. Do you, I guess, was it immediate usage you had for Spanish?
Oh, traveling? Yeah. I don't work. It was just for personal interest. Yeah, there's many places in the world that I want to visit or already visited that are Spanish speaking. So
Is there anything else that you would say that drives you as a person, your core values?
I don't know if it drives me or if it defines me, but curiosity is a cornerstone of the things that I'm engaging in. Obviously, throughout my career, it's also true in sports. I've talked about languages. Definitely traveling. So I want to see many different places. Hopefully, I'll be able at some point to talk more languages. So yeah, challenges, curiosity. I guess the downside of it is I'm not an expert of anything because of that, because I want to touch on so many different things. But yeah, it's just in me. I mean, I have to try. Food is another example. I like to try many different things. So yeah, curiosity. In terms of core values, I think loyalty is probably the top one, but transparency. Hello. yeah, you talked about family, friends. I'm hanging around with the same people I've been hanging around with the same people for 30 years plus now.
Childhood
So
friends. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I just say they're what defines me.
Humanistic curiosity. You remind me of something I just watched. Does the name Elizabeth Gilbert ring a bell for you?
It does not. No,
She
fortunately not.
is one of my favorite authors. So she records. And recently I saw a video of her defining what is a creative life. And as she said, if you follow curiosity more than you follow fear, that is like how she defined a creative life.
That's
Because
interesting.
yeah, it's like if you are willing to just follow your curiosity, which you certainly have, right? Go into the culinary space because you're interested and maybe a full-time job, and it's remarkable. Not that you were able to, not just you were able to, but you wanted to do that, and you're able to make that happen, and now pioneering the culinary space for as actors in Canada and the world. Yeah, so that's all I want to mention that when you said curiosity. Because
Yeah.
it can be fearful, it can be scary, the whole interest, because you don't know where it lands, right? And as
Yeah.
actuaries, we as profession, we tend to be generally we're conservative. We stick with what is known. So
Yes.
by branching out to something you don't know where it goes, that's amazing. I love that. And there's nothing wrong with saying with what you know. Safety is it's good. Security is good. Again, as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur now, I now see how something secure, how effective that can be. I get to take that path that you took. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for the inspiration.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, the thing is, on my end, I haven't done it overnight. It's really been gradual, but still, yeah, I have to push, harder and harder at some point to make sure that I would reach my goals. So yeah, that was kind of a fun journey.
So as we move forward, is there anything we want to see where your curiosity takes you over the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. Kind of let things go as they are now. And so trust lies in my curiosity, like you said. See, yeah, and take it from there and see where it gets me. Again, if we're being like really concrete, I think nature-related risks are probably the next thing that I would like to get involved in. And again, not necessarily becoming an expert, but really understands the nuts and bolts and how we manage those risks within a financial institution. But that is like near to medium term. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm probably a weirdo, but I don't have like long-term plans really. Yeah, but that's me. So I'm kind of comfortable with that, and as long as I have a purpose and like a good reason to get up in the morning, and I'm happy in what I'm doing, then I'm good. Yeah.
I want to finish our podcast with some rapid fire questions. You mentioned there's a lot of things you're curious in. So I can ask just quick questions. I'm diving up. The city you want to go to the most? Top 3, since there seems to be a list here.
City or country? Would country
Yes,
work?
that
Yeah.
works.
Japan is definitely in that top 3. Patagonia in the south of South America is another region that I'd like to go to. Yeah, I would say these are my top 2, but I would like to spend like more than just a couple weeks, right? To just embrace the culture and see the most of it. Yeah.
I'll figure both.
I don't have again curiosity. I don't have one specific favorite book.
Christine.
Sort of. I like novels, so I like to get entertained when I read. I really enjoyed the Millennium series, that Swedish series of books with their anti-heroes. It's pretty good stories. I recommend that. I like Dan Brown's books as well.
Yes.
I think he has a good blend of fiction, history, science. Pretty cool. Last year, I read Winston Churchill's biography.
Okay.
This reads like a novel. It's just this man had a crazy life, so it was pretty interesting. So yeah, just a couple of books that I really liked, but no favorite one.
I have to look it up. Favorite food? Last question. This is the last question.
Again, I really like to try many different things, but I would say risotto. Italian risotto is probably on the top of my list. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you, Fred, so much for being here today. Kind of a lot about virus and nature related and ESG. And I'm more glad that I got to know you a bit better. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and it was a real pleasure.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Be Brilliant with Jing Lang. We hope you found valuable insights and motivation to fuel your journey. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And share this with 3 people in your life endeavoring to achieve personal greatness. Remember, brilliance is within you, and every step you take brings you closer to your best self. Keep striving, keep shining, and until next time, stay brilliant.